Hello and welcome to another video on the channel. Today we're back on GT Sport and we're back with the FIA Manufacturers race, the start of the new exhibition season, driving for Porsche, and the first race of this new season is possibly the hardest race I've ever had to do in the FIA, driving at the Red Bull Ring in the heavy rain settings. This is not the light rain where you use intermediates, this is the full heavy setting where it is extremely difficult to drive but great fun. So for this race, managed to do quite a good qualifying lap, putting it on P4 with a 1 minute 44.870, the highest qualifying Porsche in this lobby. And there were some very fast drivers also in this lobby who have also picked Porsche. So Porsche is looking very stacked, I would say, for this season. As the next Porsche there in P6 managed to get himself up into P6, but then we've got, I think, P8 Josette. Yeah, in P8 Josette there in the other Porsche. So you can see the names of the drivers that are driving there. Some very tough competition driving for Porsche. But this track was very suited to the Porsche. I think the NSX, the Porsche, the Ford GT, all very strong. Even the Citroen was extremely strong. Calston not really getting his qualifying lap in there. We seem to do better in the practice sessions that we were in, but not able to hook it up for this race, and starting all the way down in P11. So he's going to have a hard time coming through the field, very difficult to overtake in these wet conditions. So during this video, what I'm going to do is try and give you some tips as well, some pointers, the way you drive these cars in the wet. Obviously, I'm not going to use traction control for this race. It does not help you out really if you want to get the most out of the car. I think one person in this race in top split decided to use traction control. You can use it, but I think if you want the ultimate speed out of your car, you need to do it with throttle management, controlling that throttle input as we go to the back of the grid. And you're going to see the FR cars that are absolutely struggling like anything. The only FR car, there is a couple of FR cars that can compete in the wet. The Viper that Lightning is in P1, still an amazing job by Lightning to put that Viper on P1. But the Viper is fairly strong for an FR car. I think the Mercedes AMG, not the SLS obviously, is also very strong here. So there's a few cars that can do it, and the majority of us just struggle like anything, because we're starting this race from P4. Now the main aim of lap 1 is to keep it nice and safe. So obviously on the opening lap, these tyres are going to be very cold going into these first few corners, so you've got to be very careful, especially on the traction as we go through turn 1. The Citroen getting very close on the braking, but he didn't outbrake himself. And now the main aim, obviously, going into the first big heavy braking zone where we really lose a lot of speed, braking from over 140 miles per hour in heavy wet conditions, braking just before that 150 board you'll see there, and keeping the braking as straight as possible, and then square the car off, let the car coast a little bit, and then gradual inputs in the throttle. You'll see there, we're not just going to plant that throttle down coming out the exit of the corners. You can do it for the ultimate lap time. However, this will absolutely destroy your rear tyres. It's not a good approach for the race. I had learnt this from a practice race. The best approach is to take it nice and easy on the throttle as we look at that TV replay camera, as everyone making their way through turn 4, well technically turn 4, all the way around the long right sweeping corner, very tricky corners. You see the NSX putting the Viper, driven by Lightning, under a lot of pressure there. Myself in the Porsche, Magic Alonso there in the Citroen behind that, and everyone so far kept it, looks like it's been kept reasonably clean, and everyone looks like they're on the track still. There may have been a few incidents behind, not too sure, but considering these conditions, and this is the first ever race in FIA settings with this heavy wet condition, everyone is doing a great job on the track. You can see everyone driving very nice, keeping it smooth, and doing a really good job. You know, I know this is top split, but I think credit to everyone for keeping it nice and safe on that opening lap as we now get to the end of lap 1 and start lap 2. So tyres up to temperature. See, using using the fuel mixture too briefly while the tyres are still a bit cool, just because we want to just limit the wheel spin coming out of some of these corners. It's not because I'm worried about fuel consumption, it's purely just to try and save the tyres. Now if I was optimizing this the most I could to save the rear tyres, I'd probably use the mixture 2 quite a lot. However, you can see that I need to stay in the slipstream with that Ford GT. The Ford GT gets an amazing pull out of the turn 1, and then it's got a massive amount of pull all the way up the straight. I've driven that Ford GT obviously for a whole season. I know how strong that car is in a straight line, and the aim for me now is to try and stay in this slipstream for as long as possible. As you see that Citroen getting very loose coming out of that tight right hand corner, very tricky corner to get on the power when very close to another car. You get the loss of traction because you're in that slipstream, and it just becomes very difficult to get the power down and plant it down as we now go to the braking zone. Braking just before the 150 board, you want to make sure you brake nice and early, because if you're braking even a fraction late in these conditions, you just cannot slow the car down. The car starts understeering, you lose the line for the corner, and then you're going into the corner and having to put a lot of steering angle in at the exit, which is not what you want to do when you want to get on the power, because the earlier you're on the power, the more you straighten the car up, the better in these conditions. You'll see a very strong section for the Porsche will see, so like these few corners here, you'll see how I take it early into the apex and then straighten the car up, early upshift into third, and then look at the throttle inputs. We're not going 100% straight away. We're gradually increasing that throttle from 50 to 60 and then 100%, and an early upshift into fourth gear. Really strong through that section of Porsche. I also think the lines I was taking were very good through that section. I think I need to work a little bit on sector 2, because obviously the straight is only turn 1, sector 1, but the really tight right hand corner at the start of sector 2 and the corner after that, I need to just work on a little bit of traction through them corners. But first lap completed after the out lap from the rolling start, and we go round in a 1 minute 45 point. I think that's an 8, not a brilliant lap, but like I say, everyone just trying to get their rhythm to go in this race. There's no point making too many risks in these wet conditions. It looks like one car is, if you look at the track map in the top right, you can see one car's clearly made some sort of error. He's quite far back, so he looks like he's pretty much out this race. It's probably one of the FR cars I predict with the way that them cars handle in the wet conditions. But now managing to stay just about in the range of the slipstream of that Ford in front of us. Now the slipstream is up to 1.3 seconds if you didn't know, so as long as you stay within 1.3 seconds, you do pick up a draft down the straights. But the problem with this is also you pick up that dirty air, and in wet conditions it just kind of limits your ability to get on the power, to turn the front end in. It's a sacrifice you have to take though, because on the straight the slipstream is worth quite a bit for the Porsche, and the Porsche is probably one of the better cars driving in dirty airs, and I think that's one of the reasons this car tends to suit me, because it does have quite a strong front end even when you're in a slipstream to another car. As we go through this section again, where the Porsche seems very strong, able to get it into the apex, and then you'll see not putting the power down until I'm straightening that car up, and then again off the throttle on that midpoint of the apex, because we don't want to start sliding the car. You don't want to be drifting, you want to be waiting for that traction, the moment when the tyres just grip to the tarmac, and then you can put the power down. Limiting the wheel spin is one of the main things for these longer races. This race was another race that I really did enjoy. Polyphony going for a different strategy, obviously with the full wet setting. I didn't, there was no need to really pit. You kind of needed to build these temperatures up in these tyres, so it took about, I think, 4 or 5 laps before you actually started hitting really good lap times, and that's because they need heat in the tyres. So to pit, it was kind of pointless, because by the time, if you wanted to pit to get the most out of it, you pit lap 7. However, the tyres were coming into their own around that point, I found through practice. So you pit, you lose about 8-9 seconds, and you don't really get that back. You've obviously got a bit more pace, but it's not enough to really make it worthwhile, in my personal opinion, as we go into turn 3 there, trying to get the power down nice and smoothly on the throttle. And again, you can see limiting that wheel spin by not maximising the throttle inputs at that point. The Citroen behind me managing also to stay in that slipstream, as I'm just about hanging in there with the Ford and this group for the lead battle with Lightning, Jim B Racer and TRL Adam in P3. Very close racing up ahead. You can see that NSX is looking unbelievably strong in this early phases. We have a little moment trying to get on the power, and you can see myself working that wheel. Just look how much counter steering and just being careful and early upshifting to try and dull the power a bit. But yeah, that NSX very strong when the tyre wear was strong. Seemed very good through the corners, and especially in the braking zones all over the rear of that Dodge Viper. But again, Lightning doing an absolutely insane job to be able to hold that Dodge Viper in P1 in the top split race. I didn't expect him to be able to win this race. However, it did seem fairly it did seem like a reasonable FR car at this track, from the time trial that he did as well. I did actually watch the lap, and it did seem to be able to get the power down a lot better than a lot of the other cars, I must have to say, compared to even the AMG GT3. It's not the best car, but it's not the worst car, sorry, in FR, but it's not. I'm not sure if it was as good as the Viper. The Viper was very strong at getting the power down, I noticed, compared to the other FR cars. But still, compared to the MR cars were much stronger in general around the lap. So credit again to Lightning to keep that in P1 as we now start in lap 5. A third of the way through this race, nearly coming up to a third of the way through the race. And again, these races so much more enjoyable. This race was all about consistency, keeping the car on the track. There's no point making too many risks. This is a fairly long race. It was about 26-27 minutes, something like that. So the aim was to just keep the consistency, keep your lap times close together. Don't overdrive the car. You can't overdrive in wet conditions. What I find is if you try and drive too aggressive, you tend to lose your lap time. So you'll see with my downshifting, it's not like we shift down in the rain where we're very aggressive and you want to bite that front end in. In the wet, it's very progressive. And also on the upshifts, you'll see how I early upshift sometimes in the 4th gear there to try and dole the power to keep the acceleration going, and then braking very early. I find it helps with these wet conditions. Take a tight line, then square the car off. Don't get on the power till the car is pretty much in a straight line. It really will help your lap times. And again, you'll see it through this corner. Very gradual throttle inputs, and then the car straightens up, a bit of throttle, and then I'll come off the throttle a bit on the midpoint of that apex, because look at that through the apex there, the rear starting to slide a little bit. You need to be very progressive and delicate with your throttle inputs. And again, through this right hand corner, braking very early, down into 2nd gear, progressive downshifts again, a brief bit of throttle there just to get a bit of acceleration, then off the throttle very early to skim that apex, and then again squaring it off to get on the throttle nice and early. And this is why you don't really want to run traction control, because the traction control limits the acceleration. It doesn't really work how it should on Gran Turismo. It's not the best traction control system. It kind of hinders you rather than helping you in any situation. So my advice is, if you want to become the fastest, you need to practice with it off. You see in this lobby, I think I went through the top 20, and there was only one. Everyone in this race, it was only one driver who was actually using traction control in these wet settings. As we're now over that 1/3 of the way through this race, and again we're still doing reasonably well. It's very static obviously, but this race was always going to be quite a static race no matter what the settings were, because in wet weather it's very hard to brake late into a corner and try and to get into the really the position to make a move in the corners is so difficult, because you can't risk braking. 5 meters late would mean you're probably going to go off the track and into the gravel. So it's not like dry where you can tend to use a bit more of the track and stop the car and take a different line. In the wet, you have to think about your exit speed so much, and that's what I think some people were struggling with more than other people. It's very much about exit speed rather than mid-apex speed. That's why you'll see myself straightening the car up a lot before I get on the power and early upshifting in the 3rd gear, getting through this one, you see 3rd gear, then a little lift off the throttle through there again. Just that was what that was doing, was limiting the risk of the rears sliding and drifting and causing more tyre wear, because tyre wear was going to come into factor at the end of this race. I know from my practice races I tended to lose a lot of speed towards the last 4 laps, and I pretty much knew that. So if I could hold on to this P4, I would 100% be happy for my first race back in the Porsche, probably my favourite manufacturer. It's a car that does suit the way I drive. It likes to be coasted through corners. That's what I like in a car. I like to get off the throttle, let the front end just carry you through the corner. Again, through this 1st corner, trying to be very delicate on that throttle. You'll see there 50% throttle, and then planting it down and letting it spin a little bit there, because I wanted to get back into that slipstream. You can see nearly at risk of losing the toe to TRL Adam. We've pretty much lost it at this point. However, the Porsche quite strong on the brakes, I think a little bit stronger than the Ford, but the Ford was surprisingly good on traction. That's possibly again because it's got very, very long gearing. We did talk about this when we drove Ford. Sometimes it was a hindrance, sometimes it actually helped you out. I think with the long gear ratios, it does help the Ford out, just like it does with the Porsche. It manages to keep that pull all the way out the corner without having to shift too much and getting too much torque generated through the rear tyres as we go into that tricky right hand corner. And that was a corner where I really started to improve. I think with the added brake mod that I've been using, it's only the standard TVPA Pro mod. It's the one with the little spring in it. I've used it on pretty much the weakest setting I can have it on my brakes. It hits about, I think it's about 50 to 60% brake input, and it starts kicking in a little bit, and it just adds that little bit more ability to not over brake and carry on over braking once you're once you go 100%. It doesn't take as long to start trail braking off of it, and it seems to be helping my tyre wear a lot in this game, and also my braking control into some of these corners. And I definitely could feel the difference through the Nürburgring race and also this Red Bull Ring race, where it was just controlled through the corner. I think so much of Gran Turismo's lap time and consistency is in the braking and how you trail brake into the corners. And that's why if you ever watch TRL Lightning, you're in a race with him, save the replay and watch how good he is at trail braking. He's one of the best drivers I've seen on Gran Turismo with his trail braking, and that is one of the reasons why he's so fast at the game, and also why he's one of the best on tyre wear. And obviously with tyre wear being extremely important on this game, it's always a good skill to have. As we now come through to lap 8, you can see the gap behind me. We've got that gap pretty much under control to the Citroen behind me. It's very difficult to really put too much pressure on P3 because you don't, like I say, you don't want to overdrive these cars. You've just got to try and be smooth. Our lap times have been super consistent. If you have a look on that right hand side, the first lap from obviously the rolling start, it was a 45.8, and then it's been a 5, 4, 1, 3, a 3. Super consistent driving at the moment. We've actually lost the slipstream on this lap, so this lap's going to be our first lap without any slipstream. So just I tried to drive really smooth, but try to get the throttle down as well because I wanted to get back into that slipstream, as I felt without a slipstream the Porsche was actually a little bit stronger through certain corners like this, through this long left hand corner, and then getting on the throttle into this next left hand corner, where I was very strong through these corners. I was able to really get on the throttle, put the power down, and take a really nice line through there. As again, you can see by the visual reference on the track there from this amazing replay camera that the gap has shrunk again. So I've actually looked like I've managed to get back into the slipstream toe of Adam there in the Ford, purely because, and that's without slipstream, so the pace was 100% there. It's just, I think I'm not the best at driving in dirty air, but this car, like I say, seems to help that for me, as we've got that gap back down to 1.1 seconds. So this looks like quite a strong lap. Let's have a little look as we go over the line. A 1 minute 45.1, so just off my best lap, and that was lap 8 of the race. That is what I'm talking about with these tyres. They generate the heat, and when they're in the range, they seem to really feel nice. But once the rear tyre wear kicks into a certain point, the tyres really do start to struggle. I think it was about lap 12 where it was quite a big drop off as we now go up the hill into the braking zone. Lightning's still doing an incredible job there, but it does look like B-Racer is starting to fall off him a little bit. He looks like he's struggling a little bit with traction, very similar to myself probably in the Porsche, but I'd say that the NSX is probably a bit worse with the tyre wear. I've driven the NSX as well. I have driven so many cars now, so it does give me the ability to know what certain cars will be experienced at certain points of the laps, and that's one thing I do like about changing manufacturer. It kind of gives you the ability to say, well, I know that car is going to start struggling here. I know when this car is going to have difficulties. I know the corners that car might struggle on, and I think that's a great thing to have as knowledge on any racing game. You know, if you know when other cars are going to struggle with tyres, you know when to look after your tyres, and that's something that's really good to know as we now come through again to the section that seems to really suit the Porsche through here. Again, able to close back in on that Ford GT. It seems to be the line I'm taking through there and squaring the car for them. That little lift off the throttle and then gradually increasing the throttle there. You can see that I actually got that gap to 1.4 seconds to the Citroen behind. Now that Citroen was a worry for me because, like I say, from the practice races we had the day before, Calster was driving that Citroen, and the last 4 laps, even though he was on a pad, he was insanely fast with the Citroen. So that Citroen was always going to be a threat towards the end of this race. But at the moment, we're just hanging in the slipstream, and even though we're 1.3 seconds back, as soon as we get within 1.2 seconds, we're gaining that vital 10th down the straights, and that is really important in terms of your overall lap time. As we see a penalty up front, I believe that is B-Racer in the NSX. Obviously, either ran wide through turn 1 or cut the corner. More likely that he ran wide on the outside of that corner, something that he probably wouldn't have wanted to do and probably would have lost him time. It's a shame that you get penalties for one mistake like that. This goes back to, hopefully they're going to, I would love to see some sort of strike system for little mistakes like that, especially with these races being longer. I think that a free strike system for slight mistakes like that, if you blatantly run wide and gain massive amount of time, then fair enough, you get a penalty. But I think for little things like that where he didn't gain any time and he's now lost that position, I think in real life that would be a warning. I don't think they'd instantly say you've got to give that position back. He only ran briefly wide out of the corner and probably lost himself pace on acceleration. So maybe a little free strike system, a little free X's in the top right hand corner. Your first 2 are warnings, third one, half a second penalty. I think that would be fair. Polyphony, get it sorted. As we now follow Adam, it's B-Racer now we're following, obviously, because B-Racer has made that mistake, and you can see that gap, that Lightning has now got that little comfort gap to TRL Adam in the Ford, but I think he would have rather had the NSX behind him, if I'm honest, because I think that Ford GT is a little bit stronger on the rear tyres than the NSX, and also the added weight of that car seems to help it out in traction zones, and the fact that that car is so fast down the straights is probably going to have Lightning a little bit worried towards the last few laps in this race, because I do know how good also TRL Adam can be on his tyre, where he can actually really look after his rear tyres. We saw it at Catalunya when we were driving the Porsche. He had the same tyre wear management on the rear tyres, so that would have been maybe a concern for Lightning on these last few laps, as we now just try and hold on really to P4. You can see the gap is frustratingly, it's over the distance to get in the slipstream. It's about 1.6 seconds, 1.7, something like that. And the gap to P5, he is just about in the slipstream. He's about 1.3 seconds back, but down the straight you can see he's getting back into the slipstream because that Citroen's just a fractionally faster down the straight than the Porsches. But again, you can see up ahead, B Racer still trying to put a pressure onto TR Adam. He's obviously trying to make that move while he's still got a little bit of tyre life left, because I believe if it's like the Porsche, after lap 12 it just fades too much and you can't really put the power down as much as you would like. As you see, managing to hold on though at this phase, even though B Racer has got that slipstream to TR Adam, as B Racer makes a bit of a mistake there, running very wide out the corner, and I've made a similar mistake, all sideways, just about managed to hang on to that there. That was a scary moment as the car slid all the way, and now you can see the difficulty in traction coming out of them corners. That really affects you because you've gone sideways and you've got to correct it, and then you're not lined up properly for the corner. You're then not going the speed you was before, with the gradual throttle inputs. You've then got to be more aggressive on the throttle, and it all just leads to more sliding and drifting and stuff that you do not want at a late phase of the race like this. But so far got away with that one, and still in P4 in this top split FIA Manufacturers race, following B Racer in that NSX, trying to hold on as close as possible through the final corners. Now, can we get any closer to the slipstream? You can see how much better the Porsche is, or my lines are on this last part of the lap. It seems like the last half of the lap I'm very strong. I can get back, gain about 2-3 tenths on other drivers. It seems to be coming out of turn 1, also turn, well, we say it's technically turn 3 and turn 4 seems to be a little bit of a weakness, but the other faster corners seem a lot better. That could be something to do with the way the car is. It's the way the car is. Obviously, certain cars, I know the NSX has very good brakes, so that could be why the NSX is very strong in the braking zones for the heavy stopping distances. I did see it when he was following TR Lightning. I did watch TR Lightning's race back before I've edited this video, and I did actually notice that B Racer was getting very close during brakes on the early phase because the NSX was so strong on the braking zones. But now just a few laps to go in this race. You can see we're on lap 12, just 3.5 laps to go as we look at that replay camera again, and just how amazing it looks on GT Sport. I really do. I know that it's not dynamic, I know that it's not changeable weathers, but I think that's going to come possibly on PS5 when they launch, obviously, the next Gran Turismo, hopefully. But I think this is perfectly acceptable, as that Citroen getting very loose coming out of that right hand corner, taking a much tighter line through there compared to myself, where I kind of just slowly feed the steering wheel through that corner and just let the car run out wide and then slowly get it back onto the race line. But you can see that gap at the end of this race. There's the NSX there getting all kinds of loose as well through that section, but look at the gap. You can see that Citroen behind the Citroens behind me. That's Calster managing to come through from 11th place on the grid, doing a very good job in the Citroen on the pad, bringing that car up to P6, so doing a good job. And that's what I was saying, I knew how strong that Calster was at the end of this race, so that shows you that I think if he would have got a better qualifying in, he could have been in this battle for the lead for the top 5 drivers. I think the pace at the end was very strong for that Citroen, so doing a great job coming from 11th. But at the moment, this battle seems to be a case of just holding on. Now you can see we're on the last few laps. I can see that B Racer is strong in other parts, and we're keeping that gap around. It keeps coming from like 2 seconds to 1.7. This phase of the lap, it tends to increase over 2 seconds. Then I tend to bring it back down to 1.8, 1.7, and 1.9 for this for the last phase of the lap. It just seems to vary up and down. I'm not sure if he's getting the slipstream from Adam. I don't think he's close enough. Possibly, no, he's not. You can see it on the track map. He's not in the slipstream. So that's just because of braking. You can see again, it's back over 2 seconds. It must just be that NSX being very strong on the brakes and able to turn that front end in and then get the car squared off nice and early. But then we come through to the second half of the lap. After it's pretty much this point here. You see we're 2.1, let's see what it is before we go into this corner here. 2.2 seconds, and then we come down to the braking. This fast left-hand corner tends to be quite a strong corner for myself, and then early upshift normally into 3rd gear there, getting on the power, and then braking nice and early and squaring trying to get very tight to the apex I found, and then early on the accelerator and square the car off again. Wait until your car is straight lined on the throttle, early upshifting to fourth, and again we've got that gap down to 1.9 seconds. So you can see we gained 3/10 on that section on just them few corners. So very different start, maybe different styles of driving, maybe the car coming into play as well with the way we're driving, obviously tyre wear. There's many things that could be affecting different parts of the track being stronger than other parts of the track. But again, you see we go to the now towards the first half a lap, and we'll see that that NSX will probably pull back over 2 seconds as we go into the braking zone. I think the NSX is also slightly stronger down the straight than the Porsche, so that could also explain the NSX being a bit faster. It's not massively stronger, but it's just a fraction stronger than the Porsche on the straight lines. But luckily for myself, we're starting the penultimate lap now, and we've got that Citroen pretty well covered off now, and there wasn't really much point in overdriving the car now. I just really wanted to hold on to this position. I felt like, you know, you try and push and get yourself, you know, gaining 2 seconds over 2 laps. It's not going to happen driving drivers of the quality that are in this race. So you kind of just sit back and just try and keep it smooth and settle for this result, really, because to overdrive in these conditions, you're more likely going to make a mistake than you are to gain anything. And overdriving in these conditions will, in general, lose you time. I found it so much with practicing that the smoother you are, the more gradual you are with your inputs, the more gradual you are with throttle, you know, thinking about your gearing through acceleration zones, early upshifting. Sometimes when you hear them tyres spinning, it really does all add up to help keep the car smooth, keep the tyres under control, and just keep everything nice and controlled all the way through the race. And that is the main aim for this race, not making mistakes. You'll see there's not a massive field spread, to be honest. There is one, I think there's one car in the pits, and one car massively far back in the race, probably one of the FR cars, like I say. But looking back on the track map, you can see that a lot of drivers have done very well in this race. I have to say, it's for the first ever race in the FIA Manufacturers Championship in full wet conditions. It's a credit to everyone to be able to make as limited amount of mistakes as possible, really. You look on the track, there's not been a massive amount of errors. I know there was one error that we saw live on stream. I think Sonic went into the back of Baptist in the Ferrari. It didn't look deliberate, but that was pretty much the only mistake that I seen. There was probably other little things, but nothing too bad. You know, to see that everyone is still, you know, it's not obviously within seconds of each other, but it's very well, you know, it's very close considering how long we've been racing. You know, this is the 15th lap. It's a 27-minute race in heavy wet conditions, and the top 5 are still separated within 6 seconds, around 6 seconds. Obviously, I think Lightning now starting to pull away a bit with TRL Adam, where he's got them. He looks like he's done a good job with the tyres, and TRL Adam also has done a good job with the tyres. But P3, P4 and P5 very close together. That's what we want in these races. I know it's not been as tactical as the Nations race, but this race was never going to be a tactical race. This was always going to be about keeping it smooth, keeping it controlled, and keeping it on the track. And that is what we've done so far as we come through to these corners for the final time now. Again, 2.5 seconds, 2.4 seconds back from B Racer, but then managing to gain a bit of time on the same corners again. So it's probably something to do with the car, or the lines I take, the way I change gear, or the gearing could come into play. But again, managing to gain a bit of time on the traction zones coming out of them corners, and bringing ourselves back to around 2.2, 2.1 seconds behind B Racer. And really happy with this race, to be fair. I didn't expect to be able to do the finishing time that I did. I actually drove this race really well. You can see coming through the final corners, Lightning goes over the line, wins the race with a fast time with that Dodge Viper of 26 seconds, I think it is. Let's have a little look as we go over the line. We finished that race in P4, very happy with that result, with Lightning with a 26.26, myself with a 26.32 it looks like, or 33. So that's a very, very fast time for myself. I didn't expect to be able to do that. It's faster than the practices that I had done. So 100% happy with my pace in that race, and we come away with a very strong P4 and the top Porsche driver in that top split race, and come away with just under 2.5k points. Not bad at all. I think Derek managed to pick up 2.5. I'm not sure what race he was in, because I didn't see him in my race. I didn't see him in the second split race, unless the third split race was over 2.5k's for the win. I don't know. The third slot race, not the third split. The third slot race might have been 2.5, and he won that possibly. So still did a good job. Happy with that. Hope you enjoyed that video. It was all about concentration, keeping it smooth, And again, a bit different to the Nations race, but still very enjoyable to be involved with and to try and control in them heavy wet conditions. Anyway, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed. Click that notification button so you don't miss any future videos, and I'll see you all very soon. Thanks again for watching, everyone.